I opened my door to grab a package and stopped dead in my tracks. My patio, the one I built with my own 2 hands, stained with weatherproof sealant, and bolted directly to the back of my house, was swarming with strangers setting up folding chairs, floral arches, and sound equipment. A man in a tuxedo rehearsed vows on my deck, while a woman in a sequined gown barked orders at a team of caterers rolling in trays of hors d'oeuvres. I thought maybe I'd stepped into a prank show, or worse, had died and this was some absurd afterlife punishment. But then I saw her. Karen. HOA president, self-declared property line expert, and neighborhood tyrant, standing proudly near my grill like she owned the place. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some random misunderstanding. This was a full-blown wedding, and Karen had turned my patio into her niece's ceremony stage. The only problem? She had no idea I had installed a hydraulic tilt mechanism beneath the deck. The kind that makes every guest and cake go sliding when the time is right. It had all started quietly enough. For the past few weeks, Karen had been suspiciously friendly. Not her usual nose-in-the-air routine or clipboard inspections, but a sugar-sweet, almost robotic kindness. She brought over banana bread, complimented my landscaping, and even smiled, teeth and all. At first I assumed she was on new medication or had joined a meditation cult. But no, she was buttering me up. I should have known the moment she asked if I'd be out of town over the weekend. Big plans? She'd asked, pretending to care. I'd said I might be gone a night or 2 for work, and that was the crack she needed. 3 days before the wedding, I returned home to find measuring tape left out on the edge of my patio and a white chalk mark drawn across the middle. I'd brushed it off as kids being kids, until the next day when a guy in a suit knocked on my door and asked if the property owner had received the revised seating chart. I stared at him and asked, "What property owner?" He looked down at a clipboard and said, "Mrs. Karen." She said this deck is part of the community's shared space and the HOA is hosting an event here. I slammed the door in his face, opened my laptop, and pulled up my property map. Sure enough, the patio wasn't even on the HOA-maintained perimeter. It was a solid 12 feet within my personal plot line, built with city permits and signed off years ago. The idea that anyone could claim it was shared was laughable. But Karen wasn't known for logic. She was known for her ability to twist reality and drag everyone into her fantasy version of the rules. By the time I stepped out that morning and saw a full wedding rehearsal happening on my patio, I realized this wasn't some small tea party or community brunch. This was a full production. The caterers had hooked into my backyard outlet, drawing power from my home. Speakers were set up next to my rain barrels. Someone had even zip-tied fairy lights around my garden posts, trampling the lavender I'd planted in memory of my mother. I approached Karen with calm confusion, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she'd lost her mind. Maybe she thought this was a park. "What is going on?" I asked. Karen turned, smug as ever, and said, "Oh, you're home. I thought you were going to be out of town. We're just setting up for my niece's big day. Isn't it beautiful?" She gestured around like a proud event planner. "Karen," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "this is my patio. My private property." She waved a dismissive hand. "It's within the HOA's Shared Enjoyment Clause. Section 7, Paragraph 12. Temporary communal usage of extended outdoor features." I blinked. I'd read the bylaws like a bedtime story and knew that clause was about community mailboxes and bike rack, not private patios bolted to individual homes. I could have called the police then and there. But something in me, something deeper than anger, decided not to. Maybe it was the audacity. Maybe it was the memories of every time she fined a neighbor for a garden gnome or tried to ban bird feeders. Or maybe it was the fact that a year ago, after she blocked access to my property for a spring cleaning walkathon, I'd decided I'd had enough and built something special into my deck. A hydraulic tilt mechanism, fully motorized and remote-controlled. I'd rigged it just for laughs, imagining a scenario where I might need to empty the deck in seconds. I never thought I'd actually use it. Until now. I walked back inside calmly, shut the door, and peered through the blinds. Karen had now taken a seat on one of my deck chairs like a queen awaiting her court. A teenager tested the microphone, yelling, "Testing, testing, love is patient, love is kind," while an elderly woman in pearls argued with the florist over color schemes. I counted over 30 people. Not one of them had asked for permission. Not one of them seemed remotely concerned that they were standing on someone else's property. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security footage. I had cameras on the patio corners, all discreet. I scrolled back and found the moment the first folding chairs arrived. There was Karen, in a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses, directing traffic like a wedding general. I took screenshots. Then I opened the file labeled Deck Mechanism Override. Just seeing the button gave me a tiny thrill. But I wasn't going to press it yet. That would be too easy. No, I wanted the audience full. The food delivered. The champagne opened. I wanted the exact moment that bouquet flew into the air to be the moment everything tilted and reality slapped Karen across the face. Later that afternoon, a knock came at the door. A man in a headset introduced himself as the wedding planner and asked if I could stay indoors between 4 and 7 p.m. to avoid background noise. The bride wants clean audio for the video. I stared at him in disbelief. You're asking me not to exist on my own property? He nodded sincerely. Karen said you'd be totally cooperative. I smiled. Of course. I wouldn't dream of ruining the moment. As I shut the door, my fingers twitched over the button in the control panel. But I waited. I still had one more surprise to prep. The drone. I hadn't used it in months, but today it would fly again, recording the entire event from above, streaming it to a private server. Because when this deck tilts and sends the wedding party sliding into my koi pond, I wanted the whole world to see what happens when you cross a calm man with hydraulics and a Karen who didn't ask permission. The day before the wedding felt like watching a circus train slowly derail in my own backyard. From early morning, the commotion began again, only this time there were even more strangers. A team of men wearing matching polo shirts and Bluetooth earpieces arrived, unloading what looked like half a banquet hall onto my lawn. Giant tables, silver-plated cutlery, and a portable champagne fridge were hauled across my grass as if it were some public venue. One of them dragged a cable from my external outlet with such confidence, I almost believed he lived there. And through it all, Karen strutted around in heels far too tall for a lawn, barking orders like a dictator on the eve of battle. It was fascinating to watch. Fascinating and infuriating. She moved like the entire world owed her a wedding venue, and I was simply a stubborn piece of furniture refusing to move out of the way. My neighbor, Alan, peeked over the fence with a mug of coffee, his eyes wide as he watched the chaos unfold. "You renting your patio now?" he asked with a smirk. "Apparently," I muttered, but the guests forgot to bring a check. Alan shook his head. "You want me to call someone?" I shook my head back. "Not yet. This is gonna get good." By noon, the sound system arrived. A DJ van pulled up, speakers thumping even before they'd been unloaded. The driver hopped out and waved to Karen like they were old friends. She did that air kiss nonsense and told him to start setting up next to the back fence. That was when I noticed she'd placed a sign out front that read, in elegant gold lettering, "Private Wedding in Progress. Please respect the celebration." The nerve. The gall. The absolute blindness to reality. She was treating my home like a public event space. Worse, she'd put a temporary barricade across my driveway with pink streamers and fake ivy wrapped around it. I moved it, of course. She came over and asked me not to disrupt the aesthetic. I stared at her, measuring her level of delusion. "You do realize this is my house, right?" I said slowly. She gave a dry laugh. "Oh, come on. Don't be like that. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for my niece. We've been planning it for months." I raised an eyebrow. "You've been planning to host a wedding on my property for months?" She blinked, clearly not catching the trap. "Well, yes. But it's not really yours alone. It's within HOA boundaries, technically. You should read the new amendment packet. Page 17. I slipped it under your door last week. I nearly choked. That packet? The one I used to line my compost bin? The one titled Updated Community Events Guidelines, written in Comic Sans and riddled with spelling errors? That was her legal basis for hijacking my patio? Instead of screaming, I smiled. The calmer I was, the more control I had. I told her she could proceed, no interruptions. And that's when she made her second fatal mistake. She handed me a schedule, a laminated event timeline with hour-by-hour bullet points, including dove release and sparkler send-off. At the bottom was a note: homeowner, John, has agreed to stay inside or vacate during key events. No interference allowed. I stared at the note. I never said this, I told her. Karen shrugged. Verbal agreement is enough for community harmony. You don't want to be that guy, do you? That guy. The villain. The Grinch of the bride's special day. The petty homeowner who refused to give up his space for love. I could see how she was positioning it. She'd told the family I was a friend, or at least cooperative, so she could pull off this ridiculous lie. I didn't know whether to be angry or impressed. The level of manipulation was Olympic. Around 2 p.m., a goat arrived. Yes, a goat. A white one with a flower crown on its head. Apparently the bride wanted it for rustic charm in her photos. It was tied to my porch railing like some exotic prop, and within minutes it was chewing on my garden hose. That hose, by the way, had a built-in timer and irrigation setup that I spent 2 weekends installing. Karen noticed the goat and laughed. Oh, he's so cute, isn't he? Don't worry, we'll keep him away from your little plants. I almost laughed back. Little plants. Those little plants were my grandmother's heirloom roses, grafted over 3 years and carefully maintained through 2 storms and a freak freeze. But sure, let the goat munch away. Why not? Later that day, a catering truck reversed into my lawn and left tire tracks that tore the grass into ribbons. I caught one of the caterers opening my side gate to run a power extension through my garage. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, Karen said it's fine. She said it's her brother's place. I stared so hard I think he felt his soul leave his body. He unplugged the cord and backed out, muttering apologies. But the damage was done. They'd made my house ground zero for this fantasy wedding and were treating me like a squatter in it. By late afternoon, a man with a clipboard came by to confirm the final details for the ceremony. He introduced himself as the HOA's event coordinator. I asked when that position was created, and he said, about 3 days ago. Karen voted it in. Just her. No board approval, no meeting, just Karen deciding the HOA needed an event team. And apparently, their first gig was managing a trespass party on my deck. Then came the drone issue. While testing the drone for tomorrow's big reveal, I sent it on a quiet flight loop above the property. It was discreet, smooth, quiet. But Karen noticed. She came storming toward my front door like a woman possessed. You can't fly a drone over private gatherings without written consent, she shouted. I opened the door mid-knock and said, I'm not. I'm flying it over my private property. If you'd like to step off it, I'll stop. She sputtered. This is community space. I pointed to the deed papers in my hand. No, this is lot 107. Paid for, taxed for, maintained by me. This is mine. She retreated, seething, but not backing down. Her entourage was too far in now. The tents were up. The DJ was paid. The goat had eaten my begonias. There was no undoing the train wreck without making herself look like a fool. And she was far too proud for that. So I let them keep going. I even mowed the front lawn just to add to the illusion of friendliness. But what I was really doing was prepping the stage. Checking the integrity of the tilt deck. Calibrating the timing on the override. Uploading the drone feed to my private server with a 24-hour replay buffer. Because tomorrow, when Karen gives that smug speech about love and unity and shared community dreams, I'll be watching from behind my blinds with the remote in my hand. And when the cake is cut and the couple goes in for their first dance on the center of my patio, a gentle 15-degree tilt will send the entire wedding into a slow, graceful collapse into the koi pond. And I'll be there with a fresh drink in hand, watching karma do its beautiful little dance. By the time the morning sun peeked over the rooftops, it was clear that today wouldn't be an ordinary Saturday. It was wedding day, or as I had started calling it in my head, the day the HOA went too far. I woke early, made my coffee, and stood at the window like a general surveying a battlefield. My patio was already a flurry of chaos. Folding chairs were being aligned by two flustered teens who clearly had never touched a level in their lives. A man in suspenders was struggling to hang chiffon drapes that kept sagging under their own weight. The goat from the day before had been relocated to the side yard and was now casually chewing on the corner of my welcome mat. Every moment felt like an invasion, but I remained silent, calm, watching, planning. I had already confirmed the tilt mechanism was armed and ready. I had recharged the drone batteries. All that was left was to wait for the perfect moment. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed a shiny new arrival. A truck emblazoned with the name of a luxury catering company pulled up and began unloading silver trays, ice sculptures, and crates of wine. Karen walked out to meet them, now wearing a full cream pantsuit and matching hat. She moved like a queen at a coronation, pointing and nodding as the caterers set up tables directly over the center of the deck. I spotted a tiered cake being wheeled out in a sealed box. That was when the delicious irony really hit me. That cake, carefully designed and horrifically overpriced, would soon be airborne. But that was later. For now I had to endure. Around 9 a.m., a group of musicians arrived, lugging a cello and violin cases toward the makeshift gazebo they'd erected the night before. As they tuned their instruments, the shrill sound of feedback came from the DJ's speakers just 10 feet away. The wedding planner, already sweating through his button-down shirt, looked like he was one command away from a nervous breakdown. At one point, I watched him argue with the officiant about which side the groom should stand on. All of this would have been amusing on its own if it weren't happening on my property. If it weren't disrespecting every inch of ground I had worked, built, and protected over the years. Just before noon, HOA security showed up. Two elderly men in matching windbreakers and clipboards, self-appointed watchdogs of the neighborhood, waddled onto my driveway and rang my bell. I opened the door, coffee still in hand, and raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" The taller one, Harold, cleared his throat. "John, we'd like to remind you that today's event is a recognized community celebration, and as such, we're asking all residents to respect the privacy of the wedding guests." I blinked. "Privacy?" He nodded. "Meaning no loud tools, no lawn equipment, and we ask that you remain inside or use your side door if you need to leave." I stared at him. "So I'm being banned from my own back door?" The other man, Walt, chimed in with the kind of condescension only a retired dentist could muster. "It's just for a few hours. Think of it like civic participation." I almost laughed. Instead, I leaned in. "You do realize this is my house? My patio? My wiring, my plumbing, my liability?" Harold stammered. "Well, Karen assured us she had cleared the usage rights." "Did she now?" I said flatly. "And what legal document did she use? A menu? A napkin sketch?" They didn't answer. They just gave me a printout of the day's itinerary and waddled away. By 1 p.m., the wedding guests started to arrive in waves. SUVs pulled into the street, some double-parked with hazard lights blinking. A shuttle bus dropped off a group of people dressed like they had mistaken this backyard ceremony for a royal gala. One woman in a sequin dress pointed at my flower beds and said, "Oh, the decorator really went all out." Another guest mistook my dog as part of the entertainment and tried to feed him a shrimp canopy. The dog was less than impressed. Then came the bride. A white stretch limousine slowly crept up the street, causing every neighbor's window blinds to twitch. Karen, now beaming with pride, stepped forward like she was giving away her own daughter. The bride stepped out in a billowing dress that looked like it had more ruffles than fabric. She squealed and hugged Karen, shouting, "It's perfect! Just like you promised." I could see Karen soaking up the praise like a sponge in a bathtub of delusion. I retreated into the house to avoid rolling my eyes in public. Inside, I activated the drone. It launched silently from the side lawn and hovered high above the backyard. From my control screen, I could see the entire layout: chairs, tables, floral arrangements, and the officiant rehearsing again. I positioned it just right, ensuring it had a clear view of the deck and the koi pond below. The stream was recording. Footage was backing up. The final act was coming together. Around 3 p.m., someone rang the doorbell again. This time, it was a fire marshal. He was in uniform, clipboard in hand, and looking annoyed. "Afternoon, sir. We've had a complaint about unpermitted structures and overloaded circuits being used for an outdoor event." I smiled. "Oh, really? That sounds serious." He nodded. "Mind if I take a look?" "Be my guest," I said, stepping aside. He walked through the backyard, taking photos and jotting notes. When he saw the electric cords wrapped around the deck posts, the dozens of extension cords leading into my garage, and the propane burners sitting dangerously close to the curtains, he frowned hard. "Who's in charge here?" he asked. Karen, naturally, swooped in. "That would be me. I'm the HOA president." He asked for permit. She didn't have any. She tried to charm him with cake samples. He was allergic to eggs. The whole thing spiraled quickly. In the end, he issued a written warning and told her if he got another call, he'd shut it down on the spot. She nodded politely and then turned to me, seething. "You called him, didn't you?" I shrugged. "Nope. But it's comforting to know someone did." With that, Karen stormed off, her heels sinking slightly in the soil with every furious step. The DJ took that as a cue to test the mic again, blasting a sound so loud it startled the goat into head-butting the groomsmen. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. As the guests began to find their seats and the officiant called for quiet, I made one final pass around the deck, pretending to retrieve something. What I was really doing was checking the screws and plates under the patio's foundation. Everything was still secure, still primed. But I noticed something new. A wrench had been left near the edge, and a few bolts looked like someone had tried to loosen them. My guess? Karen had found the hydraulic system and assumed it could be sabotaged with a quick twist. But she didn't know the truth. What she found was a decoy system. A dummy panel I had installed just in case. The real mechanism was deeper, better protected, and triggered only by the remote inside my pocket. I picked up the wrench, put it back in my shed, and walked inside. The bride was now standing in the center of the deck, holding a bouquet like she was about to launch into orbit. Karen was fussing with the train of her dress. The music started. Everyone stood. I reached for the remote, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "Showtime's coming." As the first notes of soft string music drifted through the air, and the bride took her first step down the makeshift aisle, I stood just inside my living room, watching through the blinds like a man waiting for the perfect storm. The guests rose from their seats in unison, a sea of pastel dresses and polished shoes, completely unaware they were standing on a booby-trapped patio that had been quietly modified with a hydraulic tilt system. From my vantage point, everything looked like a well-produced dream. The officiant smiled wide. The groom tried not to cry. Karen stood proudly at the side, her phone already out to capture the moment she believed would crown her as queen of the HOA. She had no idea that the finale she'd orchestrated was about to turn into the most humiliating crash landing of her entitled reign. The sun hit just right as the bride reached the altar, and even I had to admit, if you ignored the fact that none of it was legal or permitted, it looked stunning. The fairy lights twinkled. The flowers waved in the breeze. But the magic cracked when I noticed the DJ fumbling with the microphone again. A high-pitched feedback squeal blasted through the speakers, causing a few guests to jump and one elderly man to spill his drink on the woman next to him. The officiant tried to recover by clearing his throat loudly, but the mic only fed back again. Karen rushed forward, waving her arms frantically. "Turn it off. Just fix it already," she hissed at the DJ. He shrugged helplessly, then ducked under the table to fiddle with the power cords, some of which were tangled dangerously around my sprinkler controls. That was when I noticed something even better. The cake. It had finally been unveiled and wheeled into place. 3 tiers of white fondant, delicate flowers, and what looked like real pearls placed in patterns across the surface. It was perched proudly on a glass pedestal table, placed directly in the center of the deck. It was surrounded by champagne flutes, a carved ice sculpture of a swan, and a centerpiece of lit candles. Everything flammable. Everything delicate. Everything soon to be airborne. Karen took the mic herself and began to speak, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "We're gathered here today to celebrate love, community, and the strength that holds us all together. This patio, this space, has become more than just a deck. It's become a symbol of unity." I almost burst out laughing. A symbol of unity? She was standing on stolen property, pretending to host a royal wedding she had no right to arrange, and she thought she was delivering a TED Talk. My finger hovered over the button, but I didn't press it yet. I wanted the moment to be perfect. Then came the vows. The bride took the mic and looked lovingly at the groom. "From the moment we met at Karen's HOA mixer," she began, "I knew you were someone special." Of course Karen had made herself the origin story. The groom, holding back tears, began his own vows, but just as he opened his mouth, a gust of wind blew Karen's wide-brim hat off her head and sent it tumbling into the koi pond below. The guests gasped. Karen shrieked. The goat bleated. For a split second everything froze. The DJ scrambled to lower the volume. Karen leaned dangerously over the railing to shout at someone to retrieve her hat. The bride looked flustered. The groom looked irritated. And I decided that was my moment. I pressed the button. The hydraulic mechanism activated in silence, barely noticeable at first. Then came the shift. A slow, creeping tilt that began to angle the entire deck forward by a few degrees. The guests didn't notice immediately. But the champagne bottles did. One tipped, then rolled. Then a stack of plates began sliding across a table like a slow avalanche. The cake trembled. The table legs creaked. Someone shouted, "What's happening?" as the tilt increased. Now the flower arrangements toppled. The violinist's chair slid back. People stood quickly, confused and disoriented. And then the cake tipped over in glorious slow motion, launching itself like a sugary torpedo off the deck and straight into the koi pond with a splash that sent water everywhere. Screams erupted. One guest lunged forward to catch a falling champagne flute and slipped, landing hard on the deck. Another dove after a runaway gift box. The DJ's table tilted and his laptop slammed into the floor. Karen shrieked louder than the speakers, waving her arms like she was trying to direct traffic in a hurricane. The bride screamed as her dress got caught under a sliding chair, dragging her toward the edge. The groom tried to pull her back and slipped on spilled wine, crashing into the decorative candles, which flared up briefly before being doused by someone throwing soda on them. Amid the chaos, the goat had somehow broken free of its leash and was now trotting across the deck, leaving tiny hoof prints on tablecloth. Karen, now visibly soaked from the pond spray, turned toward the house and screamed my name. "John! John, what did you do?" I opened the back door and stepped out with an expression of deep concern. "Is everything okay out here? Looks like the deck's not level." She stormed toward me, heels slipping. "You sabotaged it. You rigged it to collapse." I shrugged. "Actually, no. I had it upgraded last year to be a multi-angle accessibility platform. Very expensive. ADA compliant. Maybe too many people on it at once triggered the safety tilt. Who knows?" The HOA board arrived then, finally, as if summoned by the screams. 3 of them, in polos and khakis, walked up and stopped cold as they saw the wreckage, the drenched guests, the toppled decorations, the goat trying to eat a bouquet. One of them whispered, "What the hell happened?" Karen ran to them, dripping wet, makeup streaked down her cheek. "He did this. He rigged it. He destroyed my niece's wedding." But instead of rallying behind her, the board members looked at each other. Then one said, "Karen, did you use HOA funds for this?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. It was a communal investment for neighborhood engagement. That was all it took. The oldest board member pulled out a binder and began flipping pages. "You've spent nearly $4,000 on unauthorized event. You forged permission forms. You claimed this was approved in a board vote we never had." Karen's voice rose. "You can't talk to me like that. I'm the president." "Not anymore," the woman snapped. "We're calling an emergency vote. Right here, right now." In the middle of a wet, ruined wedding, with guests still screaming and the groom chasing a goat, the HOA board gathered and voted Karen out of office. On the spot. The moment the vote was unanimous, she collapsed into a folding chair that immediately slid off the patio and dumped her into the wet lawn. I turned and walked back inside, drone still recording from above, capturing every glorious second. I uploaded the footage that night to a secure drive and made a short edit of the highlights. The cake flying. The goat's escape. Karen's scream mid-tilt. It was the best 10 minutes of video I had ever created. Karen, humiliated, left the neighborhood 2 weeks later. Rumor had it she moved in with her sister across the state and was banned from joining the local HOA. The bride and groom, meanwhile, tried to threaten legal action but quickly dropped it once the ownership documents and surveillance footage were sent to their lawyer. Apparently trespassing on private property while lying about permission doesn't make for a strong case. In the end, the koi were fine. The goat was adopted by a neighbor. And the patio? It's still there. Still tiltable. Still watching. Just in case someone forgets who it belongs to. By the following morning, my patio looked like the aftermath of a failed music festival. Chairs were strewn across the lawn, deflated balloons tangled in the branches, soaked floral arrangements wilted under the weight of overnight dew, and remnants of the once pristine cake floated lazily in the koi pond like sad, sugary icebergs. The drone footage had already been downloaded, edited, and stored on multiple drives for safekeeping. I hadn't posted it publicly yet, but I knew the moment would come. I just didn't realize how fast everything would spiral once the community caught wind of the disaster. Word spread like a neighborhood wildfire, and within hours, phones were ringing, group chats were buzzing, and Karen's reputation was unraveling like the hem of her niece's soaked dress. I hadn't said a single word in the group thread. Not one message. But others had. Neighbors who had watched the spectacle unfold from their back windows were now sharing screenshots, clips, and stories. Some praised my restraint. Others couldn't believe Karen had the audacity to call it a shared celebration. One even joked that the goat was the most composed guest in attendance. I knew the board would take action eventually, but I never imagined it would turn into a full-blown HOA courtroom drama. A special meeting was called within 48 hours. Not the usual Tuesday evening get-together over lemonade and passive-aggressive eye contact, but an emergency session hosted in the community center with folding tables, bottled water, and a security guard at the door. Apparently, someone thought Karen might show up swinging. I sat quietly in the second row, arms folded, watching as the board members filed in, faces grim and determined. Karen was already there, dressed in a blazer 2 sizes too large and sunglasses indoors. She looked more like someone testifying before Congress than a suburban HOA president defending a failed wedding stunt. The board wasted no time. They laid out the evidence in neat, logical order. Unauthorized use of HOA funds for wedding-related expenses. Forged permission slips supposedly signed by neighbors who later denied any involvement. Falsified documents labeling my private patio as communal green space. And, of course, the drone footage, projected on a screen in crystal clear HD for everyone to see. I almost felt bad when Karen's face appeared mid-scream as the cake launched into the koi pond. Almost. Gasps echoed across the room as the footage played. The tilt. The chaos. The goat. And then, finally, Karen storming across the yard in heels, demanding justice, only to be publicly voted out in front of everyone. The board president paused the video and turned to Karen. "We gave you multiple chances. You crossed legal lines, ethical boundaries, and you embarrassed this entire community." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her voice cracked under the weight of the evidence. One final vote was cast, this time to ban her from holding any HOA office in the future. It passed unanimously. After the meeting, people gathered in the hallway, buzzing with new energy. Someone asked if I'd consider joining the board. I smiled politely and said I preferred the view from the patio. Another neighbor offered to help repair the grass that had been torn up by the catering truck. A third gave me a homemade pie as a thank you for, as he put it, returning our neighborhood to sanity. It was like I had unknowingly become the town hero. Not by speech, not by protest, but by pushing one button at the perfect time. Karen moved out within the week. Her house, once the command center of neighborhood surveillance and rule enforcement, went up for sale with a listing that suspiciously avoided any mention of the recent incident. Buyers came and went, but it sat on the market longer than expected. Word had gotten around. No one wanted to buy from the woman who made the HOA infamous. I heard she relocated to a quieter subdivision across town, one without a governing board. The irony was almost too sweet to taste. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. Karen had attempted to file a lawsuit claiming emotional distress, public defamation, and technological sabotage of a sentimental event. It was written with the flair of a soap opera script and included printed stills from the drone footage as evidence. I passed the letter on to my attorney, who laughed for nearly a minute straight before drafting a response. His reply included deed records, the permit history of my patio, proof of private ownership, security camera timestamps showing her unauthorized entry, and video documentation that I had never physically obstructed the event. The cherry on top? A signed statement from the engineer who helped me install the hydraulic system, confirming it met safety standards and had never been compromised. The lawsuit evaporated before it reached a courtroom. I decided then that the drone footage should serve a greater purpose. Not to mock, not to taunt, but as a warning. So I edited together a short video, entitled HOA President Throws Unauthorized Wedding on My Private Patio, Gets Instant Karma, and uploaded it to a well-known community-focused platform. Within hours it went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, ranging from praise to disbelief to pure comedic gold. People couldn't believe the lengths Karen had gone to assert her control. Memes were born. Someone added dramatic music and re-uploaded it as a movie trailer. Even local news outlets picked up the story, calling it a modern parable of suburban justice. The video's popularity led to another unexpected result. A local production company reached out asking if I'd allow them to license the footage for a documentary series on neighborhood dispute. I said yes, of course. Why not? Let the world see what happens when people get too comfortable trampling on others in the name of self-importance. As for the patio, it's better than ever. I resealed the wood, added new lighting, and even painted a subtle compass design at the center, just a nod to where the cake once stood before launching skyward. The hydraulic system still works like a charm, although now I've added a small sign above the deck stairs that reads, "Warning, tilts when provoked." Guests think it's a joke. I just smile. I still get the occasional curious visitor who recognizes me from the video. They'll ask if the story was real, if the tilt was staged, if Karen truly existed. I always tell them the same thing. Oh, she was real. Very real. And very loud. The truth is, that wedding taught me something I never expected. That silence, patience, and preparation can sometimes deliver more justice than shouting ever could. The neighborhood is quieter now. More peaceful. There's no one measuring grass lengths or leaving anonymous notes about garbage bins. The HOA meetings are civil again. People smile more. Even the goat, now adopted by a family down the street, has become something of a mascot. And every once in a while, I'll look out at my patio, take a deep breath, and remember the day I watched an entire event slide into a pond, along with years of entitlement, manipulation, and ego. And that's the funny thing. All Karen ever had to do was ask. One conversation. One simple request. But she chose control over courtesy. And in the end, she got exactly what she ordered. A wedding no one would ever forget, held on a patio that answered back.